What would it be like to be a farmer? Yeah, a lot of us probably have some mental imagery of what that would entail, but imagine doing it in a country far different than the one you were born and raised within, say, a country like Japan. Well, I do have you covered by way of this guest today. His name is Thomas Kloepfer, and he runs a farm, Pitchfork Farms, out of Japan, a place located kind of close to Hiroshima, but it is on an island. And just that alone kind of gives up a lot of really interesting stories, insights, takes on a life that's far different than what you might imagine. So in this talk, we get into it all. We get into a day in the life. What's it like, some of the challenges, some of the rewards, some interesting stories, a whole bunch of things. So I do encourage you to listen, watch this entire episode. You can check out the full audio version wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... And in this video compilation, we're going to touch on some of the highlights of that conversation. All right, well, this first clip I want to show you is about farming in Japan, and I do want to throw this qualifier in there. The farming that Thomas does is not the traditional type that you might imagine. He's involved in something called agroecology, which basically is it's a different form of, the management of farming, and it considers a lot of issues of biodiversity, how to naturally farm, how to integrate several different types of crops all at the same time. So what he is doing is also unique in that sense. Plus, again, he's doing it in a country like Japan. So anyway, here's a clip of him introducing, his farm and what he is doing.
Well, I think in Japan, we have this concept of satoyama or satoumi. Satoyama being sato is village, yama is mountain, and so you often would find villages closely attached to their mountains that were in and around the properties, and the constant human interactions there. Sometimes very positive, sometimes can be negative too. And how that could potentially sustain the village and the people around it, but also could and potentially sustain, the ecosystem itself. So that interaction is really important there. And so in the context of Japan, Satoyama, I think, plays a big role.
You'd say that more so. I mean, just from my experiences in Japan, community being a big element, a communal element of the culture, you would say that that's emphasized a little bit more here versus, say, within the US or some other Western markets or countries.
Yeah, certainly. I think because of the size and scale of agriculture that takes place here, there are certainly large and much bigger farms than what we're doing here. But really, because it's so mountainous in Japan, it's very difficult to have really large scale production. So you do need a greater community to help manage and maintain the spaces.
Now, in featuring a guest as a farmer in Japan, we probably need some mental imagery of this farm. I mean, Japan itself is a very mountainous country, so what does that look like? How does this farm sort of take shape? Well, here's Thomas describing his farm for you.
We don't have a lot of flat land here on the farm. We're located on a hillside just above the inland sea. And at first it was an abandoned plot, and over time we've had to work with what we have essentially. So it's sloped, and it was a citrus orchard at one point, probably monoculture citrus, and I knew that I didn't really want to go that route and grow just one thing. And in order also to pay for the trees and get started, we were starting to plant trees at one point. I guess 3 years ago, but really over the last 7 or 8 years, we brought in goats and now sheep to kind of clear the spaces we want to work in, and on hillsides again, and then we'll integrate crops into in between those orchard rows as well. So give a little bit more space, but that's what helps create the biodiversity on the place. So at any one time, you can walk around the farm and have 15 or 20 or 30 or more edible plant species there. The flatland that we do have, we we do what maybe is considered market gardening or organic farming there. It's the flatter spaces, and they're usually about 50 feet to 30 feet of vegetable production and several
Okay.
rows of that. And so that's kind of the mix of the farm right now. But
All right, well, next up, here is a day in the life of running a farm in Japan. So have a look.
start the morning pretty early these days because there's just so much to get done.
Yeah.
It's we're going into summer now, and it already feels like the rainy season. So you're getting the right amount of crops in, getting our seeds in. So we're planting or transplanting either in the morning. Um, I have animals on the farm too, so I'm usually doing rounds with them, making sure that my animals are fed, making sure they have water, and that usually goes into lunch. Where lunch right now we have different projects going on, whether it's working in the forest recently or going over and we're currently renovating another property house, and so we're also doing that as well.
Okay.
And then in the afternoon, I like to transplant a lot of stuff because it does get hot during the daytime, especially in this season, and so we're trying to get stuff in, get them watered, and then uh, in the evening, like if I can, we'll have food fresh from the farm that day, and and from there it's checking emails, checking on orders, using social media to kind of share what we've done throughout the day or what we've got going on in the week. So that's a typical day in our farm. Yeah.
Well, this next question involves something that's probably on a lot of people's minds when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to farming. It's this notion of climate change, right? How do you manage that? What do you do about that? Now, Thomas's answer was really quite compelling. It involves some things that I wasn't expecting. One being culture, another being this notion of agroecology, and yeah, his own unique approach to it all. So here's his take on managing that challenging aspect.
One of the things that I think, going back to agroecology, is really honing in on the biodiversity of our region and our area, because we're on an island
Yeah.
and in the southern part in Hiroshima. And I would say that what we might have grown in this area 50 years ago maybe won't work in 10
Yeah.
or 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, well, I think we just have to keep making adjustments. Our farm grows a lot of different varieties of plants, and we
Hmm.
reach different points in the year where we can't really see several days or weeks or even months ahead to really know what's going to happen, because every year has been different with either extreme heat or heavy
Yeah.
rains, more mild winters, where um, but having the biodiversity here, having the large number of crops and plants, animals on the farm, I really think maybe it's an advantage in some
Mm.
ways to really try a lot of things. Sometimes I think too, as a foreigner in Japan, I don't bring a lot of the same, um, you know, cult culture in terms of food that I, would want to have or need to have or would like to grow. I can
Yeah.
really branch out and expand and bring in other crops that I think have done well in those times, but then most
Hmm.
people might not know about or most people might not eat.
Well, I do have one more clip that I want to show you, and this is involving, the future of Pitchfork Farms, where Thomas sees the farm going, all the different opportunities that are arising, and yeah, where he could see himself with the farm in the future.
How do you envision things moving forward for you? Like, would you like to continually, build out your farm? It sounds like that's been happening, whether you've been sort of planning it or not. You've been approached with different opportunities that almost are too good to pass up. Do you
Mhm.
want to keep growing it out that way, or do you feel you're going to reach a point where like, oh, there's only so much I can manage here? Where do you stand on that?
Currently, we have a lot of people who yeah, you mentioned the lifestyle. They're somewhat interested in this. I think the last several years, where people have tried to maybe moved a little bit away from urban areas. Not to say
Yeah.
that it's a huge jump, and I don't think it really will be. Tokyo will continue to urbanize
Yeah.
like it is, and I think that's just just one other natural progress that we're seeing. But we do a lot of workshops and tours. Recently, we have these events at the farm, and I mentioned renovating a new property, and we're currently renovating that. My wife's company will be working out of there, and then we're going to be trying to sell more produce from the farm through the space as like a cafe or kind of farm to table
Nice.
restaurant.
Yes, we are drawing to a close here, but I do encourage you to go check out the full-length audio version. You can do so wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... And in that full-length conversation, there's so much more covered. Of course, there's way more insights involving, life in Japan, farming in Japan, but also we get into discussions centered on technology, how he's leveraging that to kind of ease the burden a little bit of the work he's involved with. We also get into some of the unique opportunities that have arisen since he's had this farm. He's had property that's been gifted to him. Just a few weeks ago, before this recording, he had the U.S. ambassador to Japan stop by, him and his wife, for a visit. So he's also been featured as well on the national broadcaster in Japan, NHK, media attention. So yeah, a lot of unique opportunities. We get into all of that. So yeah, I do encourage you to check out the full-length audio version. Now, I do have one last request for you. It's always a little bit of a funny one for me, but all the same, I'm gonna ask. I would appreciate a like or subscribe. I mean, it's the only way that this YouTube algorithm knows to kind of put it out there in front of others. I mean, I could be a bit biased here, but I think this content matters. It has the power to really expose youth or mid-career professionals to new opportunities, to new ways of life and living. And I think there's value to that. So yeah, I would appreciate that like or subscribe. But anyway, I will have a new episode coming at you right next week, so stay tuned for that.